Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you all here with us. See people joining the call. You're very good to be here. My name is Nick Askew from Conservation Careers, and welcome to this month's training webinar. And today we're going to focus on something really fundamental to conservation success. And that's how do we design and manage conservation projects that deliver real impact, okay? Projects are so important to us as a sector, as a whole. They are, in many ways, they are the pixel size of activity of what we do within the sector, or the Lego bricks, of what we're building together to create impact in the world and save wildlife. A well-designed and well-managed project can make a huge difference for wildlife, and the people involved. We're talking about, setting clear goals. We're talking about understanding problems and the roots of those problems, testing assumptions, adapting, learning, and sharing our knowledge. It's the whole cycle about how we improve, how we get better, how we save wildlife as we need to. Whereas a poorly managed project, can really lead to wasted time and money, which is something none of us really want right now. So it's no surprise, therefore, that project management and design skills are the most valued skill set for conservation employers the world over across many different job types. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. So we're really excited. So this evening, we're going to share the framework used to create and deliver high impact conservation projects the world over. Not just activities or outputs, but real measurable change. That's what it's all about. And we're going to show how you can actually strengthen those skills also in your career. Now, before we kind of get going and before I introduce our co-host here this evening as well, let's make this a little bit interactive. Wherever you are, if you can jump to the chat, that'd be great. And let me know, where are you and who are you? So in the chat, just jump in there, tell me, I'm Nick, I'm in Cambridge in the UK. Who are you and where are you? Let's know each other a little bit. It'd be really nice to kind of hear and see from you. And then as people are doing that, let me introduce our guest host here this evening. Our expert in residence is Felix Chabula. Now, Felix is a certified conservation standards coach, facilitator, and coach trainer. He wears many hats with over a decade of experience supporting conservation teams the world over. You've trained over professionals in 45 countries, including WWF, the UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, Denver Zoo, and many others. Felix, it's great to be back on a webinar together again. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Nick. Thanks. I'm doing very well. Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, look, I can see people joining here in the chat. I'm just going to show it here in front of us. Who have we got here with us? We've got Marina from Brazil. We've got Adrian in the US, Kat in LA. Got quite a few. Illinois. Leah. Hey, Leah. How you doing? Good to see you in the USA. Laura in upstate New York. Quite a lot from the USA today, by the looks of things. Felix, aloha from Hawaii. Suzanne, wonderful. Cameroon, California. We've got someone from the West Midlands, a bit closer to home for me. Neelam in Portsmouth. Welcome, everyone. Look at this. You are a busy group. It's really nice having you wherever you are. I hope you're safe and well. It's really nice having you here this evening. Uganda, Florida. We've got someone else here from Florida, Felix as well. Mar from Spain too. Great. It's really nice having you all there. Let me just kind of hide this out of the way. Wonderful. Next, so in terms of who you are and where you're from, you kind of represent actually quite well the kind of diversity of people that we serve at Conservation Careers. If you can sort of see this, and as you see quite a few of you actually from the USA, you're very welcome. Wherever you're from, you're most welcome. So we serve, an audience of just over 1 million people per year, students, conservation professionals from 235 different countries and territories. And you can see, I guess the main kind of lens through which we serve most people at the moment is English, because I only speak English so far, and as does my team, but we are looking to expand into other languages over time. But you're really welcome wherever you are right now. Another quick question, just to kind of get us limbered up and warmed up. Again, jump to chat if you can. Quick poll. Which best describes you of these? Are you a job seeker? Are you a student or maybe a recent graduate? Are you a switcher? Are you transitioning from another sector and looking to kind of move into conservation? Or are you a professional conservationist? Which one of these kind of do you think best describes you? If it's none of them, you're very welcome to write other as well. That's absolutely fine. Ooh, Felix, whereabouts in the world are you? Let's get to know, let's offer you up a little bit more to our community here.
Yes, I am actually based in Berlin in Germany. That's my hometown where I grew up, and that's where I still am. I do work with teams around the world, mostly outside of Europe. That's true, what you said in the introduction. And I've been doing so for the last 15 or more years. I've been consulting. I work mainly as a consultant, and I do guide teams through challenging processes, let's say. Conservation teams, that is. And you're right, Nick, like a lot of that has to do also with training and coaching and mentoring and facilitating certain discussions and processes for these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is what we're really going to talk about today, actually, sort of breaking that down into what the projects look like and even how can teams engage in projects like we're going to talk about too. So yeah, thank you. Again, we've seen a lot of people here responding. It's really nice. I can see job seekers, professionals, Bradley, Elizabeth, you're a switcher. Yeah, we've got quite a few switchers. Sarah, you're a job seeker too. Yeah, hopefully you can see you're kind of in good company. Yeah, you're not on your own, whichever one best describes you. Let me just show you just kind of briefly, what does our audience look like? And again, I think you're reflecting the audience quite well, so in terms of who we serve, about when we ask our audience, about 48, well, let's call it 50% of you are job seekers. You're in kind of job seeking mode, as I saw quite a few there in the chat are. 19% students or recent graduates, 23, so nearly a quarter, are switchers of you guys out there. So you're looking to kind of follow, maybe convert, transition your skills into conservation. You're very welcome. And also we've got a kind of growing cohort of professionals as well. We're kind of serving and helping to be really good and impactful and find career success, which is really our kind of core mission here at Conservation Careers. And again, just a last bit of limbering up and warming up as we get to know each other a little bit. Another quick check. We're talking today all about project management and design skills quite specifically. But which one of these best describes you? Just a bit in bold if you want to respond into the chat. So, how confident do you feel about your project management and design skills? Not confident at all, so not. A bit confident, so a bit. Fairly confident or very confident. Be honest, this is a judgment-free space. I promise you, we're not going to kind of judge if you got none or everything or anything in between. Just be nice to just check in and see where you're feeling. Felix, when you're talking to professionals, like what portion of professionals do you think actually have formal kind of project management, design and skills training? What do you think is typical?
That's a very good question. And I think the answer would have been almost zero, but because you said formal, like formal training, I think almost no one really has a good formal training in project management, at least not in the conservation space. We're really not there yet compared to, let's say, the private sector. But a lot of people do have some skills just given the experience that they gained through very hard times and challenging phases. And then the support they then seeked, let's say, in that moment. But formal training, not so many, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think there's a lot of trial and error that goes on, particularly in our industry. I don't know if it's typical for conservation, but a lot of us kind of learn it on the job, and sort of struggle through and do our best. I can see quite a few fairlies and a bits. Yeah, thank you for sharing, everyone. I've been reading it out. Stanley, you're confident. That's great. Okay, Erica, it's so true, indeed. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thanks for sharing, guys. So what are we going to cover today? Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So what we cover are the things you can see in front of us. We're going to break it down to kind of 4 things, really. First thing is we're going to talk about why project management and design really matter. Like, why is this important? I think just to kind of set the scene, so you understand why this is an important thing that we're talking about this evening. It's probably one of the most important things we're going to talk about this year, I think, on the webinar. We'll do this month now. Having looked at why, we're going to talk about what are the conservation standards. Now, you might have heard of conservation standards, you might not have heard about them. We're going to talk a bit more about that. Felix is going to introduce them to us about what they are and how they work. And then we're going to talk about how you can build those skills properly yourselves. How you can kind of build them into your career to help you to become more employable and even better at your job as well. And we're going to hang around, Felix and I, to answer any questions you might have at the end as well. We've got an hour scheduled. We're going to finish well within the hour. That's our plan. And we're just going to hang around for questions afterwards if you have them. Okay. So that's the plan. At the end of it, we really want to have, real clarity and direction around this. And really, my goal for you is that by the end of this session, you'll be able to understand why these skills really matter for impact. You'll recognize what employers are really looking for with regards to these skills, and you'll see how you can build these skills properly. Okay. Whew, right, we've got a lot to cover. We're going to keep things rolling along. Okay, so let's talk about why these things. I think even before we kind of dive into, why project management skills are important, let's just take a little sort of step back and ask the kind of slightly bigger question that hangs over everything that we talk about here as conservationists, which is, why does this matter? Why does it matter right now? Why are we worried about wildlife and conservation, and why should we be seeking to tackle it and upscale our impact even more? Well, really, the stats kind of speak for themselves, and they're quite stark actually when you really dive into it and get close to it. Wildlife populations have declined, as you can see here on screen, by 73% since 1970. And I was born in 1970 something, so that's not too long ago, really. It's not a small shift by any means. It's a real kind of systems level crisis that wildlife is facing globally, which is quite stark. Alongside that, 1 million species, according to IPBES and UN, are at risk of extinction right now. The scale of the challenge that we as a sector and you as aspiring and professional conservationists are facing is really quite large, and biodiversity loss is happening at 10 to 100 times faster than natural rates. So the uncomfortable truth is that all the best efforts going into conservation, and so many of us doing and dedicating our lives to helping, we're still losing ground as an industry. And I do think we need to kind of respect that and own up to that as well. Actually, the question really becomes, therefore, what needs to change? How are we going to turn this around? It's a question actually I ask on the podcast of every host, of every guest that comes through. Actually, what do we need to do more of or be better at to really move the needle here? And as pressure increases on nature, so must our impact. It's not just about more work. It's about better designed, more effective work, or in this context, better designed, more effective projects, going back to that idea of pixel size, or the Lego building blocks that this industry is really built upon is really around projects. That's the size that funders fund, and that's the size that often conservationists plan as well, okay? So this is really why today's training really matters. And when we look at what employers are looking for in the sector, we've analysed over 35, nearly 36,000 conservation jobs that have flowed through our site in recent years, and we find that 55% of all jobs that we share require project management or design skills. This isn't really optional anymore. This is really core to the profession. It's really important. It's something that the sector's recognised, employers have recognised, and it's really seen as valued as vital for impact, for yourself, but also for the sector and the wildlife that we all care about. When we look at employers who are actually looking for, they're looking for things like, people who can, design and manage projects. Can you even, can you adapt and learn and improve as you manage projects? We all make mistakes, but are we improving? Are we getting better? Are we sharing our successes? Can we secure funding? That's a really important part of the project cycle. Designing a project, funding it, managing it, often then communicating and going around again. We'll talk about cycles more as we go through the webinar today. And then, as I said, can you communicate effectively with stakeholders or key audiences or whatever you want to call them? Essentially, organizations and employers are looking for people who can turn ideas into projects and then really into conservation impact, and that really is, the central piece of what we're looking to deliver as an industry. So I think this matters really for kind of three reasons when we're thinking about the whys, why this is important. Firstly, it's for impact. It's a key word. I've said it probably 10 times already in the webinar, but impact is so important. We need to kind of dial up our impact as a sector. We need to be doing better conservation, okay? Number two, employability. This is a way of becoming more employable by investing in your skills and becoming better at this sort of work, getting hired. Employers really value this skill set. And then linked to that is career progression. I think as a professional conservationist, yes, you'll have more impact, you'll be more employable, but you'll also be moving forward in your career with greater confidence too, which I think is really important. It's a real kind of skill multiplier. So we've started to kind of explore, why project management and design skills really matter in terms of, the scale of the challenge, the importance these skills have, and how they shape your career. So let's just shift a little bit away from the kind of the why, and let's start moving into the kind of what. What does a good project design and a well-managed project look like in practice? And how do we do this properly? How can we do this well? To bring this to life, what I want to do is just start with a very short, it's a 1-minute video that introduces something called the conservation standards, which Felix is going to tell us more about this evening. It's the globally recognized framework that underpins everything we're about to explore today. So let's just take a quick look, okay, and then we'll hear a bit more. Now, it's important when you play tinkly music. It's so nicely done, but I think it does bring it to life, what the standards are all about, and starts to introduce to us, the global use of the standards, as you'll hear more about in a second, the importance of them, the impact that the standards are helping to create within the kind of conservation community. So I'm going to hand over to Felix. Felix is going to walk us through the background of the standards and also the 5 steps. You'll see that in the swoosh. We'll learn more about what that is, so we can start to consider how we can apply this in our careers as aspiring and as professional conservationists. So yeah, Felix, over to you. Tell us a bit more about these standards.
Yes, thank you. Before I dive in, just quickly, I want to mention that I was actually introduced to the conservation standards during my study time. And it was so captivating for me. It was so convincing that this actually led to the work at the job that I'm currently doing and love doing. So even if you are a student, I think it can heavily impact the path or your career. You don't have to be a conservationist just yet, or have to have a position in managing projects to benefit from that. I think it's, at least to me, it's a very captivating. There's a captivating community behind it. It's really nice. Anyways, just wanted to give that, say that out loud up front. And also, second point is, this is open source. You don't have to pay. You can go to the website. I'll show you that in just a second, and just download the manual. It's free of charge. We want you to apply it. We maintain it, and yeah, it's sort of like a tool to the community that shall and should be used as much as possible. Right, just upfront. All right, let's dive in. If we go to the next slide, Nick.
Yeah.
You see, like, as I said, it's called the Open Standards for the Practice of Conservation. The short handle is the Conservation Standards, just because it goes over the tongue more easily. But if you navigate to the website, or if you Google it, you will find the document that you see here on the left-hand side. That's the very latest version, and inside you will find like this cyclical logo with the associated 5 steps. I will tell you a little bit about the history of how this all came about. Who stands behind this? Why is this free of charge? Like, who is making all the money with it if it's free? Or maybe no one. And then we will go through each of the 5 steps, and I show you just a glimpse into what I think are the highlights to mention in this 1 hour that we have today, so that you get a little bit of a better understanding of what this methodology or what this framework is all about. Okay. So on the next slide. I might have a little delay here, Nick. Sorry if I'm talking a little bit slower.
It's up to me, yeah.
Perfect. A cyclical project management framework is nothing new, right? Like, we know that. It's not that we invented that. Many have done that before. It's based on adaptive management principles. It's been used not only in conservation, but outside. The military historically has been very good in being very flexible. They had the need, obviously, to be very flexible in situations and adapt to new changes, right? So it's not that we claim to have invented a cyclical management framework, right? But that is one of the core foundations, because we believe that this is fundamental to running a good project. If we go to the next slide, Nick.
Yep.
This is the cycle that we will be dealing with. This is the cycle of the conservation standards, the 5 steps, and each of the bullets are sort of like the sub-steps of each of the chapters. And we'll go through them one by one, and I'll show you a little bit of the highlights. So if you click on the next slide, why do we do this? Or why did this all come to life, right? You may or may not recognize this stone. This stone is called the Rosetta Stone. It was found, I think, late 1700, and it had hieroglyphs in ancient Greek and a 3rd language on there, and it helped make sense of languages that we did not speak just yet. And that's sort of like the metaphor for this conservation methodology as well, because many organizations around the world did great work, but we all called the same thing a little different, right? What you call a target, I might call an objective, or someone else might call a goal, or an aim, or one of the many other words that exist out there. So one of the main targets, not the only one, but one of the main targets actually was to find a common lingo, one joint language that we speak, that we all apply and that we all use, so that we basically understand each other better and can better learn from the mistakes and the successes that others have made before us, right? And try to replicate the things that worked well and try to avoid the pitfalls that others have already discovered, let's say. So that was one of the reasons why this all was designed at the beginning. If you go to the next slide, Nick.
Yep.
Like I said, many of the big names are part, but also some small ones. These are not all the founding members, but the founding members are on here. You will very likely recognize a few names on here. These names change. This might not be the very latest depiction of all the organizations, but online you will see it. It's called the Conservation Measures Partnership. It's basically a consortium of different organizations that all believe in this approach. It's not to say that they only use that approach, right? But they support and endorse the idea of having this one framework and also maintaining it over time. And if you go to the next slide, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
You see that, at the very beginning, there has been multiple iterations since the very first version of the conservation standards. And that is because, well, we preach adaptive management, so we need to adapt the methodology and, develop it further and further over time, trying to adapt to new challenges. Climate change came in at a later stage, not at the very beginning, or let's say more prominently. Human well-being was one of the topics that came in at a later stage that just wasn't included at the beginning. So you will see that actually at some point you will go to the website and the version that is currently the new version is very likely outdated, and we will find a new one. If you click on the next slide, Nick. This is a user-curated map that we have online. It just shows like a glimpse of all the projects around the world that are using the conservation standards in one way or another. These are by no means all of the projects. It's just those who volunteer to, throw their project on the map, right? But technically, you can click it and find out who is working on what, where, and potentially even have like a lead to get in touch with someone who works on the same, let's say, species or ecosystem, or is trying to fight a very similar threat in a region than someone else may have been doing so for many years already, and gathered experience that you could, dock onto and learn from, which is fantastic. If you navigate to the website of the conservation standards, you will be greeted with this little portal. You see in the center, you see the conservation standards. So this is where you can download the manual that you've seen, like the guidebook, the PDF. On the left-hand side, you see the Conservation Measures Partnership. And if you're interested in that, like who stands behind it, how did this all come to be? And then on the right-hand side is what I teased a little bit at the very beginning, is what's called the Conservation Coaches Network, which is a network of very dedicated individuals. It's all voluntary-based, and we are people who like to support others in applying the conservation standards, right? Some of us are trained coaches, some others are not. They just help their colleagues, but we all are organized in a global network, and we have regional networks as well, where we can always reach out and find friends and colleagues and ask for support in whichever question we might have. And that's we are like a few thousands by now, and it's one of the greatest communities I know, one of the most supportive resources that I can actually tap into, and I can only recommend at least checking it out if you're interested. So that's just the history of the conservation standards in a nutshell. One thing to mention, there's also a software that was developed, which is called Mirati. People speaking Swahili will recognize that word. And this software, I'm also part of the Mirati team. This software is dedicated, or was built, tailor-made for applying the conservation standards. By now, there's more features that are not necessarily part of the conservation standards, but that we just found to be useful for the conservation community or for users. You can create an account for free. You can use some of the basic features, and then there's a subscription model. You don't have to do all this. You can, but anything that the conservation standards, teach you or show you or suggest, you can do with a pen and paper or in Excel, or whichever solution is the most comfortable for you. Okay. Next slide, Nick, please.
I'm a Post-it note man, by the way.
Say again?
I'm a fan. I think when I'm
Yes.
sort of planning things out like that, it's quite useful. Yeah.
Yes, we work with Post-its a lot, actually, also with the teams. That's very correct. All right. So that's the history. Let's dive into, like, I give you a quick run through of the 5 main steps of the conservation standards. Okay. I will be using some examples. You don't have to follow the content. It's more about the concept, right? Like sometimes you see we're trying to protect a jaguar. Well, you don't need to know all the details about jaguars right now. It's really more about the concept of why we believe doing a certain assessment is important or not at a certain stage. Okay, so don't be scared if you can't follow the little scribbles on the screen. I'll guide you through. Okay, next slide. So the first step is the assessment stage, right? So apart from assessing and designing your team and the purpose of your project, you want to talk about the vision. You want to talk about what the scope is actually, like where physically or where in the concept is it? Are you dealing with a threatened species? Are you trying to protect a swamp or a forest ecosystem or half a continent? So all of that we will capture in what we call a conservation situation or situation model, which basically consists of multiple little elements, as you see here on the screen, that inform us about something. So on the right-hand side, you see the ovals. Those are the aspects that we're trying to protect, right? So we want to protect the forest, we want to protect the rivers and the lakes. And then also we care, in this case, maybe about the local bee population and the jaguar population. There's a million reasons why we can, decide for one or against one of these conservation targets here. That's really dependent up to the individual project. And then you also see the other ovals are water security, local health and nutrition, financial security. So everything that contributes to the well-being of human beings, because we realize that I think almost nowhere, if even anywhere on this planet, conservation doesn't work without humans. There's always like a human component in it. So it doesn't make sense to exclude it. So we need to find a way to depict that also in our very simplified diagram here, right? So if we know what we try to protect, we then want to analyze from what do we want to protect it from? Like what are the negative forces that are impacting the things that we care for, right? And so obviously that comes in the alert color, red, pink. That can be illegal logging. It can be palm oil plantations. It can be hydropower. It can be poaching. It can be climate change. It can be so many more things, right? But these are the direct physically impacting elements in the diagram that directly harm the things that we care for, right? And usually illegal logging has reasons, right? Why do we go into the forest and illegally log a forest? Multiple reasons, right? Can be large-scale companies that are just profit-oriented, can be the local communities that just try to find fuel wood to cook or to heat their houses or find construction materials. So the reasons are there's multiple reasons why something is in existence. And so we want to depict that as well, right? So we're really trying to come up with like a diagram that explains the situation that we currently find on the ground. If we were to go into the field, this is what we would see in a simplified version, I admit. Okay, next slide. So now that we understand what we have in front of us, what we're working with, we go to the next stage, which is the planning stage, right? And so if you go to the next slide, Nick, in the planning stage, we come back to our element, and we now want to find those key entry points, right? The points where we want to attach a strategy, which is here depicted in the yellow hexagon. But it's like the things we want to do to change reality, to change things on the ground, right? We can do restoration work. So we can plant, for example, trees. That's the work we do directly on the element that we care for, right? On the focal target, or the focal value in this case. But we can also start at the very beginning, right? We can start designing sustainable agriculture programs and try to really attack the root causes of some of these symptoms that we see out there, right? So this is sort of like where we start planning. What could we potentially do? We could, like pull a lever here. We could do something here. We need to be strategic because usually we don't have endless amount of money or resources in general. So we need to prioritize, right? But first we sort of like plot into this diagram or into the situation analysis, where do we want to attack? Where do we want to sort of like enter and do something in order to change the course of a certain process or a dynamic, right? If we then decide for which strategies we want to go, we will take them, and this is a term I assume that you have heard before, or some of you at least have heard before. It's called theory of change, sometimes also a results chain. What we're technically doing here is we're taking the strategies, which are the yellow hexagons on the left-hand side, and we're putting them on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we're putting the things that we care for, trying to protect. And in between, we put everything that we assume happens or will happen if we implement our strategies, right? So the sentence always goes like, if we implement strategy A, B, and C, let's say, then we expect to see the following change in the field. And if we see that change, then we expect another change to come in. And if we see that, then we expect something else to change, all the way to, let's say, poaching, that we want to see a reduction in poaching, right? Because we tackled some of the key issues of why poaching was existent in a certain area, right? And obviously, if poaching goes down, we would expect the jaguar population to stabilize, increase, or at least have a positive effect on that. Granted, it's just a sliver. It's just an example, right? There's many more strategies we need to attach, but at least for the poaching part, this is what this team decided for, right? Yes, full stop. So let's say this is what we'll do. We'll stretch out the model a little bit and now start thinking deeper and say, well, if these are the three strategies, what are they really entailing? Like what is included in those? And you see the little yellow and purple boxes. These are the activities that we associate to strategies, right? So if the strategy is, let's say, the umbrella of a bunch of things that we want to do. So, for example, build up environmental awareness, right? Or strengthen law enforcement, or strengthen the legal regulations that are in place or not, right? And now we go into the detailed planning. We write out the activities that we believe are necessary to get from one change to another, right? Like from one behavior change or from one awareness change to an actual behavior change in the field, right? And then, because I said it's all about adaptive management, we also want to make sure that we don't just say in the beginning, we do this, and then 5 years later, we assume that the jaguar will be healthy, the population of jaguar, right? But we actually want to make little measurement points along the way so that we're able to track almost live of how the population of the jaguar is changing, right? To see if we actually have an effect. And we also want to see not only the jaguar, we also obviously want to see if the changes that we expected, that we anticipated in the field are actually really helping, right? If we did an environmental education in schools, and the assumption was that the kids will go home and tell their parents how beautiful nature is, and then they will stop poaching, well, we want to measure if that really happens, right? There's a good assumption that this can very likely happen or not, right? And so we want to track the assumptions that we had at the beginning in order to then be able to, if things go off track, to go back into the planning stage and say like, wait, what happened? This didn't come through, so let's adjust the course so that in the end, in the 5-year or 10-year project lifetime, we can correct the course and sort of like try to get back to what we believe is important for the ecosystem to be like, right? Like the functionalities of ecosystems or the population dynamics of a species, right? And then you also see, I'm simplifying, right? You also see the little triangles. These are the indicators. So we associate indicators. It's a very scientific approach, obviously. So the indicator is the measurable unit that you apply for each of the objectives or the goals that help you actually track that progress over time, right? You can also track if you did what you promised to do, which I always think is a little boring. I'm more interested in the change in the field, but honestly, yes, sometimes it's also important to also track if we are delivering on what we promised to deliver, right? So you can track both of those pathways, let's say, right? That's possible. Anyways, so we're filling this up, which seems sometimes a little childish, like we run around with little sticky notes and we write stuff and we draw on arrows, but we're filling it with more and more and more information. And we're having really good discussions while we do it, because usually you sit together with a bunch of colleagues and teammates and take decisions. And usually we don't know everything. So we invite others, right? Could be local community leaders, could be politicians, could be the private sector. I don't know. Whoever you think is important to have their knowledge and experience and thoughts in the room for that process, that's what you want to do, right? And we're capturing it in a very systematic way. And if you switch to the next slide, Nick, we then basically go into the implementation phase, right? Let's say, okay, we finished the designing of strategies and we think this is really solid. Let's go implement, right? And we start implementing. And on the next slide, Nick, you see that, let's stick with the example. We have this the 3 strategies and the associated activities with it. If you go to the next slide, we can translate that or actually populate a table. This is just Excel. You could use any software solution for this or keep it on a piece of paper, whichever, right? But basically now we're saying these are the 3 strategies that we want to focus on with the associated activities. So we can now attribute our staff members or partners to it and assign times, right? This needs X amount of hours. This needs another X amount of hours. And so by doing that, you get an understanding of how good you're using the resources that you have within your team, right? And sometimes you might realize, oof, we're really overworking that one person, right? Maybe he or she is very important and holds a lot of knowledge, but you need to protect your resources as well and make sure that they don't burn out, right? Which is a very common thing these days, unfortunately. So this is one way of managing the hours and sort of like plotting and to see if you need to maybe, attract more funding, more donor funding in order to hire more people or partner up with others or do whatever it takes for you to implement the strategies that you decided for in a sustainable manner, right? And also, obviously, this all you can see, it goes into reporting, right? You can use those for the donor reports later on. So we're getting, we're making sense of all the little stickies that we initially started with. This is just a screenshot from Mirati. It's basically the same as I showed you before. Obviously, Mirati is built for it, so there's a few very nice features, but technically you can do all of this on paper in Excel or you use Mirati. And on the next slide, Nick. And then once we have the times, we can associate the budget, the finances with that, the hours, the equipment, the travel time, workshop facilitation type stuff, renting hotel rooms, inviting people, like all of the things that you need to do in order to plan your budget for a project or a multitude of projects, which is usually called a program, right? So all of that, all of the initial planning now translates into the work planning, into the budget planning. You get your action plan from it. So a very thorough and good analysis in the beginning and dedicated time for these processes to really, be thorough and good really helps you in the later stages of these projects. Next slide, Nick. So while we're implementing, I said it before, at some point we want you or we recommend you to stop and pause and reflect, right? We call it analyze and adapt or pause and reflect, which basically means in a periodical system, you stop, you look back and you sort of like analyze what you've gathered in information until then, right? In order to notice if you're still on track or not. Should you not be on track anymore, you should correct course. If you're still on track, well, try to learn why that is so that you have a better understanding of what worked really well so that you can maintain that dynamic and that velocity to really get there. Or maybe even ramp up and say, wow, we've been so successful, we might as well try to reach even, a more ambitious goal that we initially set. That's obviously always allowed, right? If you click on the next slide. In order to do that, you usually need to prepare your data. You very likely have different data systems, platforms, tools, field trackers or databases, servers that you use. So you need to make sure that the data set is complete. You need to make sure that the data is clean, streamlined, and then you can then go into the analytical parts, right? Next slide, Nick. You then analyze, you look, you assess, you sit together, and we recommend you do that also with the stakeholders or interested parties that are in the vicinity of your project, so that you get the reflections of multiple perspectives and not just you or your organization's perspective, obviously. And so once you've done the analytical part, you adapt. And it's also recommended to track those adaptations that you made over time, especially if it's a longer project framework or project timeline, because people come and go, right? You might hire someone new, someone else leaves the organization, and those people leaving or those people coming in have a much easier time understanding why something is the way it is, or why something was changed along the way, if you provide, like a good framework that tracked those rationales, those reasons, and maybe like the evidence that you gathered that made you change course, right? And that's just, best practice, I would say, to track changes over time. By the way, also really good to have that for donor reports. They appreciate that very much. They much more prefer you to be open and talk about the failures and the successes and why you want to change course. If that's done well, they're more than willing to usually to allow those changes, like budget-wise, than if you just kept your mouth shut and tried to make it until the end and then said, didn't really fully work, I'm sorry. So just preaching, saying, be open, be transparent.
Yeah, it's interesting also earlier on when you showed all those logos, Felix, that 4 or 5 of them are quite big donors, aren't they? This is quite donor-driven too. They want the confidence in the projects. They also want to be able to track it themselves as well as delivering good impact. So it all weaves in nicely.
There is, yeah, you're right, Nick. It's a good observation. There is a few donor organizations that actually require some of the reports of their grantees to be in the framework or to use the conservation standards and use specific frameworks so that they're all streamlined. They all can evaluate them and manage their grants accordingly. Yeah, that's actually right. Yeah, which is fantastic, right? We need to bring both parties on the same level and try to get a better understanding for each of the worlds. Yeah. And then last but not least, we want you to close that circle by sharing your information, sharing the experiences, sharing the successes, sharing the failures, which is usually not the easiest, but it's very important, very appreciated. And usually communications and outreach is part of any organization, right? You do communicate to the outside, depending on the audience, maybe the public, the general public, other civil society organizations, the political world, supporters, like anybody, right? Partners. So it's a very important step also then for the networking and this idea and this concept of us being one global community that supports one another rather than competes for grants and competes for publications and successes, which I know is happening. I know that's also reality, but we're trying to do it a little bit differently and exactly, and use the systems that are available, social media, websites, whichever form of communicating what you have learned, right? Can also be a conference, can be publications that you do, right? In whichever way. Click to the next slide, please. We want you to share, right? We want you to share the learnings that you made. May that be internal audience or external audience. And then on the last point, next slide. The idea, one little excursion. This is Miradi. Miradi hosts projects, and we are actively encouraging people to make their projects public with the type of information that is allowed to be public, obviously. And you see a few names here. Bush Heritage Australia is a fantastic power user. We love them. They do a lot of great work, and they make a lot of their projects actually accessible to the public. So you can actually, look into it, learn from it, even reach out to the project manager if need be, or if you're interested. And usually, they're very responsive and very approachable, and you can learn and you can exchange thoughts, especially if you work on a related element. May that be something that you try to protect or something that you try to fight in terms of the threats, right? And so that being the global community that is out there, that is trying to, apply these things, learn along the way, make things better, improve over time, and share. And we're very happy for everybody to reach out, to connect one another or to connect others. I have a colleague in Colombia. You should talk to her. She's amazing. And then we, establish those connections, and it's just truly, truly fantastic network, global network, which uses what I believe is a truly, truly fantastic framework, state of the art, at least for the conservation sector. Nothing new. We're not claiming, to have reinvented the wheel here. It's applied. It's tailor-made for conservation projects, and that's the catch. It's open standard. It's open source, so everybody can use it, and it's curated and maintained and protected by a bunch of organizations, small and big, trying to keep the quality and the level of accuracy as high as we can over time. And that's why there's new iterations every few years, trying to incorporate the feedback that we get, the experiences that we gained over the years, and making it available to anybody who has a benefit in using it. That's the end of my presentation. Nick, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. Yeah, that was so interesting to hear, like not just the history, but also see example come to life and seeing like how you can assess the system level, if you like, what the issue is, understand the strategy, plan that out, right to activities, and also how much things cost. And also just reflecting on like the community that's behind it. I think that's really important. I mean, conservation is a small community of really passionate, well-connected people. Yeah, and it's a really good example of that. I'm sure so many people know each other. You can connect people so quickly. Yeah, it's a really great way to kind of really dial up your impact. Yeah, so thank you, Felix. That was so helpful. Yeah, I think what that really shows is that there is kind of a better way to do conservation. And I really think the conservation standards is a really good framework to allow us to kind of upscale the impact, in a clearer, more structured, and more effective way. But for most people, as you sort of touched on earlier, Felix, actually, is it isn't necessarily how many of us are trained. Many of us are sort of figuring it out, as we go. And I think that's fairly typical. The gap between, what good looks like, and how people actually are working is often where I can frustration sits, and more importantly, where I think impact is often lost. And impact is so important in this sector. It's what we need to dial up really rapidly. A decade ago, just to kind of share like a personal story for myself, I was the program development manager. I was the person who developed programs and projects for BirdLife International across the Pacific. And my role was to raise funds really for conservation projects across 8 Pacific countries. And to do that, I often had to design conservation projects, working with partner organizations and local communities and governments to build strong, fundable projects for donors. And over 3 years, I was very fortunate to have funded, I developed 47 projects, 32%, so about a third were funded. And in total, we raised, 2.5 and a bit million pounds. And on paper, I share that not to show off, because it looks successful. But the honest truth is, I had no formal training really in project management or design. I was learning through trial and error. I was figuring it out as I went, and yes, I improved over time, but it was slow and often felt frustrating, and looking back, if I'd had the conservation standards and the framework and I understood how to implement it and use it with confidence, I'm very confident I designed better projects. I'd have secured more funding. Yeah, and I'd probably have had more impact too. And I think that's really important, and something that I reflect on quite a lot. The good news is really, the conservation standards, and learning things like this, it's not about talent. It's not about being naturally organized or gifted at this sort of stuff. With a good teacher or with support, you really can learn this stuff relatively quickly and relatively easily and hit the ground running. Yeah, and start to kind of make the impact you want to see in the world. Okay, well, before we kind of, I guess, go into that in more detail, and just to kind of check you're there and still engaged with us, just drop to the comments. Let's go to the comments for a little bit. What one thing have you reflecting on, or are you taking away with you that you found most useful or interesting from what you've heard so far this evening? We've covered a lot of ground, but yeah, is there anything that's kind of standing out for you that you've been, quite that's resonated with you? Yeah, I can see here, Lulu, you're saying so true. The honest result is that sharing is the key. I think that's really important. Yes, that's that kind of final part of that cycle we talked about there. Yeah, it's really about kind of just sharing results, learning, and then going back around another cycle and sharing what you've learned, sharing your failures too. Yeah, I think that's so important. Yeah, it's nice to kind of, just to kind of reflect and think about that. That's really important. Okay, well, I think, yeah, please, Felix. Yeah.
Sorry, Nick, I thought, while we wait for some more comments to come in, I think it's also important to understand that you don't need to know everything as a project manager. You cannot know everything, right? Like, you're a good manager if you know whom to bring into a certain process at which time, right? Like, you cannot be the expert for everything. So don't sweat it if you don't know. Like, it's really about having the right people in the room at the right time. So that's the interesting part. And I saw someone studying cinematography and like so many other trades that you mastered before switching into conservation. That is fantastic. We need all of you. We need the scientists as well, but it's amazing to see how many different skills are from out there that support conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, conservation is such a large, diversifying professional industry, and we need all people and all skill sets in this industry coming in to help us. Yeah, this is a core skill set, but yeah, you can sort of see some of the comments coming in. Everlasting, Limbai, you saying, love how project management in general has been integrated into conservation. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Zoe, by creating this, and it will help other people to do projects with efficiency and resource management. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, Elizabeth, great to learn about the framework indeed. Yeah, it's really nice kind of having Felix here, who is the master of this, kind of teaching us and showing us, how to do this. Yeah. So where to go next, really? As Felix highlights, this is all open source, freely available. You can go to the Conservation Standards website, download the guides, pick it up and start learning it for yourselves, which is pretty a really it's an amazing thing. It's out there. This is really for impact. This is about getting it out there, helping people to understand why it is, and hopefully you're motivated to look into it more and kind of pick it up. So now you've seen kind of how the framework works and what it is. And really, I guess the question becomes, how can you apply this and learn this in your own work? Not just understand it, but really use it properly with confidence. And really, there's like two approaches. Yes, you can learn it on your own and use the open source resources. I think that's amazing. Yeah, you can also learn with others if you want. You can kind of come along with us. I think you'll go probably further and faster if you have a structured course, an expert teacher like Felix, and a community of people behind you who can help and support you and keep you on track and motivated as well. And really, that's why we created, this thing which we call the Certificate in Conservation Standards, Project Management and Design. Through it and through this online self-paced course I'll tell you a little bit more about, we can guide you through this process step by step and through the full cycle, from assessing and understanding the context and the threats, to planning, setting clear goals and actions, to implementing, and turning it into reality, and adapting, analyzing, and also sharing and embedding that learning and sharing it for wider impact. So, and after completing the training, you can see here on side, the goal here and the outcome for you if you took the trainings, you'll understand how to design and manage a conservation project using the conservation standards. It's designed really to take you from, understanding the framework to actually applying it, confidently in your own work, because we want you out there using this and making the most of it. It's designed for people at all different stages, really. So if you're an early career, it can help you to build like a strong foundation to build out from. Professionals, it's about bringing structure to your work and having more impact and dialing things up and making you more employable. Researchers also, but switchers, and graduates and students, it's about really learning the system properly from the start, a core skill that can make you more employable and help you to kind of move forward more quickly with more confidence. So we can kind of meet you wherever you are in the training. How does it work? Well, it works like so many of our courses and certificates at Conservation Careers. It's 100% online and self-paced. And it's about 8 to 12 hours of learning. The idea is you could, if you wanted, do it in a day or two. and really kind of binge through. We encourage you to do it bite-sized. We've broken it down to bite-sized modules, but it works around your life. So you can kind of come in and come out as and when you need it. You have access to it to work through. It's full of real-life examples, which I think is really important. It brings it to life. This isn't just theory. This is a kind of bringing it to life and understanding how it's actually applied in the real world, in practice. And you get support from our expert in residence, Felix, who you now know really well. In terms of like the options for how you can enroll in the program, if you're interested, there are two options. There are two ways to go. Okay, so you can enroll in the individual course on its own, enroll in this certificate in project management and design using the conservation standards as a single course. So you get like real kind of focused skill development, and you get 1 year's access for that. And you can kind of see the price points there on screen. It's £250, $330 or €300. We also have, as of this year, we have our CC Pass, okay, which is our all access membership, okay, for all our courses. And we've got a growing collection of certificated courses that sit alongside this that can really kind of help to accelerate your career development and take it to the next level. The price points for that, as you can see, they're £147, $195, €174 per quarter, and you can cancel at any time. So you can jump in, do the training if you want, cancel within 3 months, and you've got that and other trainings too. So it really comes down to, do you want to kind of solve this one problem and build out this one skill, in which case the individual course is really right for you? Or if you want to kind of build out a skill set and kind of get wider support and work towards deeper trainings, then the CC Pass is there for you also. Inside the CC Pass, if you're interested, we also have our Conservation Career Kickstarter, which is our flagship career planning training for aspiring conservationists, whether you're a student, job seeker, or a switcher. Helps you to really understand the conservation sector, the job types, and to navigate and orientate towards your best option, understand your gaps, and really kind of build a solid employability plan, along with understanding how applications and interviews are delivered and how you can get job offers. We have all our career courses. We have other career courses that sit alongside that as well, about applications and interviews and also public speaking and others. We also have all our certificated courses as well, alongside loads of events, resources in our community that sits within that, plus 40,000 jobs per year and so off. And I think what's most important is you get support. You get support from me, the Conservation Careers team, and also the wider community. I mentioned a little bit about you get access to all the certificated courses as well. Each course has an expert in residence. You've met Felix tonight, who's our expert in residence for conservation standards, project management and design. You also get support from me. You know me now. We have Chris there next to me with the stripy top. She's our head of coaching. We have Lloyd Gofton, which you were here last month on our training. You know him as our expert in residence for conservation communications, of which we have foundation and advanced level trainings for that. With the hat on there in the middle, we've got Kate Evans, Dr. Kate Evans, who's our certificate, our expert in residence for conservation fundraising. Then on the right with the glasses, we have Helen Gibbons, who's our expert in residence for community-based conservation, another course. Bottom left there with the hat on, we've got Pedro Ribera, who's our certificate in rewilding expert in residence. Then we have David Johnson for conservation education, Tara there with her hands open for public speaking. Then we've got Dr. David Schiffman as well, who's our expert in residence for marine conservation. So we've got a whole catalogue of trainings as part of our CC Pass. In terms of this specific training we're talking about this evening, conservation standards, project management and design, what are people saying? Well, it's been going now, I don't know, is it 4 or 5 years, something like that, Felix? And we've had 300 students through, and you've done a good job. I mean, satisfaction and recommendation ratings, you can get better than that, but you can't get a lot better than 97%, right? It's very good.
Yeah, it's very happy to see those numbers for sure.
Yeah. And also the Conservation Measures Partnership, which you introduced at the beginning, also Felix mentioned them already. They did review the course. They went right through it in full detail, start to end, and they rated it as excellent. And you can see what's said there in front of you. Very thorough, excellent presentations, real practical examples. I think that's really important, the practical examples. This isn't theory. This is seeing it in action, okay, in the field, how it's actually done. And it's really engaging. Really bring this to life for people, and you really make it easier and sort of show the toolbox that is the conservation standard. People can pick up different tools as and when they need it, or they can use it as a full cycle and go right through the full cycle, which I think is really important.
Yeah, we had to skip today a little bit, like some of the detailed assessments, viability assessment, threat assessment I didn't cover, but obviously, yes, we go through the entirety of the standards in that course, and everything is covered. And hopefully slow enough, you can always pause to, ride along and actually apply it to your own project, should you have one at the moment. Sort of like as a living guidebook, so to speak.
Yeah. Good way of thinking about it. Absolutely. Yeah. And as long as you're in the course, you have access to all that training. It's all there, the resources, plus much more. So, if you're interested, the key dates you can see in front of you there. If you're thinking, you want to feel a bit more confident in your work, if you want to deliver stronger conservation outcomes, you want to move forward in your career, do consider enrolling in the training. We're here for you. We'd love to support you through the training. Enrollment closes this Saturday, okay, the 28th of March. It's open from now until then. And then the course begins. We unlock the training proper for everyone that's in the training the following day on the Sunday. And we'd love to support you in your conservation journey. Okay, I do have a fancy QR code I can show on screen. Look at this, Felix. Boom, look at that. If you are interested, if you're on a phone or something like that, you can always click through and find it. The website is conservationcareers.com, hyphen in the middle, /project-management. Okay, you kind of find it that way too. What I'll do is I'll probably leave that on screen. I think I might hide this, and that will probably make us a bit bigger. There we go. We can even go like that. There you go. I've been moving around all evening, but I think it's worked quite well. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Felix, for being with us this evening. Thank you all as well for being online with us. It's really nice having you here. If you want to ask questions, we're now over to you, okay, for Q&A. So we're here to kind of answer any questions you might have. If you do have a question, if you can just do it as like a short one-sentence question in the chat. What we don't is long essays to read. So keep it quite pithy and short. And we're happy to hang around and answer those questions for you. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll throw the chat up on screen as well, so we can kind of see any questions that might come through. Woo, wonderful. We've covered a lot this evening, Felix. Covered a lot of ground.
Yes.
And I have to say, we were absolutely, can we say at an hour? We were like a minute within the hour. So I think that's absolutely bang on time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Winning Streak, thank you for the presentation, for making this available. You're very welcome. Thank you so much. Greetings from Colombia. Thank you for sharing. Very useful. There is a question in here. I'm going to do this up here. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Very useful in the field. You mentioned not complete for resources when senior leadership promotes non-competition for resources. How can a young conservation professional, and it's cut off the bottom, how can a young conservation professional raise valid counter arguments in a constructive and credible way? There's a question to get our teeth into. Not necessarily related to the conservation standards, I have to say. But yes, how can you raise concerns to senior management in a professional and constructive and credible way? Have you had any experience of having to do that yourself, Felix, or seen others that might have done something similar?
Honestly, sometimes, but I'm not the best person to ask. Like, I'm not the best resource. Usually the organizations that I work with are more of the larger organizations, and they have their funding streams pretty well set up, and I almost never have to mingle with those. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, because you say when senior leadership promotes non-competition for resources, how can a young conservation professionalist raise valid counter-arguments in a constructive and credible way? If I interpret your question the right way, I think it really depends. I don't have a good answer for you. I think it really depends on the situation and on the grant. I know grants are competed for. There is no doubt about it. You need to be the best proposal to win. That's very hard, but it doesn't necessarily prevent you from not sharing the insights or not reading over someone else's proposal. That's what I regularly do. I read through proposals from some of my colleagues, and we're competing, but I think that's okay. May the better win, right? And we're all in this for the same cause. And the next time someone will pull me into a consultancy where you need a larger team or more resources or more expert knowledge in a specific field. So it's a competitive world out there, no doubt about it. Sometimes that triggers creativity, it fosters creativity, and sometimes it stands in the way of good conservation projects and good conservation work. And so where that is the case, we should try to reduce it, and where it fosters creativity and learning, we, I guess, should maintain, being good human beings, I guess, and just, compete in a fair way. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. We have another question here from Run Susie Run 78. If you're born in 78, so was I. Yeah. This is so useful, very kind. What is the value of investing in this course instead of a general PMP, project management professional course? Felix, do you know what we mean by a PMP course, and how does it contrast and compare conservation standards method?
Well, for project management, there's a few standards out there, usually from the private sector. There's some similarities and there's some overlaps for sure. I know that the private sector is much more competitive again, and these certificates in project management are being protected much more. So there's certificates. You need to take exams. You pay a lot of money, and if you need it, well, rightfully so. If it gives you the right skills for the job, well, then so be it. I think what I at least like about the conservation standards is that you don't need to go through all of that business and payment, and it's just free of charge. Just use it, see it as a tool bag, and apply what feels good. If a specific part in the standards don't feel applicable to your work, to your project, waste your time, right? And so if you don't need a specific project management certificate because your workplace requests that, or the position that you're applying for requests that, then I think if the position is within the conservation sector, I think you definitely benefit from going through the conservation standards as a framework and learning the principles of that. And you can always get a certificate in one of the many other project management courses. But I've never taken one, so I want to be very clear. I also don't really know all the details of those methodologies. I know the conservation standards really well. In the conservation sector, they're really applicable. They're also not the silver bullet. They're not solving all of your problems. You still need to be creative. You still need to, bite your teeth in and fight for good conservation outcomes. But that's the case in any project, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess really key to the conservation standards, it is very specific to conservation. So it's applicable directly to this field, to this industry. Although it's borrowing a lot of methods, from and best practice from elsewhere. Yeah,
and it's built, by conservationists for conservationists.
Yeah. Jason, you've asked a question here, Jason Video. You've got a degree in environmental studies after video production, hence Jason Video. 8 years later, you're looking to get a foot in the door of environmental conservation, I guess. Is there a list of organizations to search for opportunities? We do have lists on our website, just to kind of flag that. Conservation Careers, we have a lot of jobs on the site. So we have about 4,000 jobs live right now and do at any one time. But we do have lists of employers in the US, for instance, and so forth. You can kind of jump in and look at the resources that are there. That will probably be a good starting point if you're looking for that. What else do we have? Yeah, Felix, this is interesting. Zoe's asking, can someone in a conservation education field of conservation, sustainability and tourism move over to in the industry to form part of developing projects? So this is someone with kind of education, skills and experience. It sounds like she wants to be involved in the kind of project development aspect of developing projects and possibly therefore implementing too. Have you got any thoughts as to how someone kind of, whether you're in education or not, what's the way to kind of get your foot in the door in project development teams? Yeah.
Good question. I think there's two scenarios, right? One where you bring in your old life and the expertise from your previous career or previous job and use it as an asset and as something valuable to the organization that you now go in. And then the short answer is yes, you can definitely go into project management or project development type roles. I think anybody is suited for that if the task that you start with is not ginormous, right? If you don't have to manage an entire continent, but you start small. And then there's these two pathways or two scenarios. One where you bring in your old expertise because you loved it and you just want to change in the landscape, or you don't because you really had enough of that past and you don't want, you want to close and you want to start something new. So I think it depends a little bit, but organizations are usually very keen to hire people that come from the outside because you have connections. You have like you can't imagine how many lawyers and financial analysts are sitting in conservation jobs these days, and the organizations are very happy for the expertise that these people bring in, because conservation work these days doesn't necessarily mean you work with the local community on the forest, right? Like, yes, also, but you might also want to influence political processes. You want to influence funding streams from major banks in your country. So there is a lot of specific knowledge that is incredibly valuable in order to implement one of the many strategies that you designed, right? The yellow hexagons, if you remember. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Also, I was thinking also, Zoe, like if you're, let's say, working as like a freelancer, in environmental education or something like that, then a good way to pick up work is to get your work developed into projects, which I think is probably what you're touching on. So if you can connect to organizations that you feel your expertise or environmental education could benefit, and get them excited about an idea and understand how it fits into what they're doing, then as they're developing projects, and ideally if you're in that too, as part of a group of people involved in understanding the scope and assessing and building things out, then as funding comes through in the future, fingers crossed, then it actually starts to fund your work as well. It's kind of a strategic way of picking up work, actually, is by seeding the idea and then getting that into a donor funded proposal that might actually come to fruition. So yeah, it's all part about how you kind of connect yourself into the industry. It's a really interesting question that you raise. And just kind of moving on to Henry as well. Thanks for your question, by the way, everyone. As someone in the PR comms industry, what's the best way to get myself working as a comms person in NGOs or just environmental organizations or conservation heavy companies? Yeah, it sort of connects really what you were saying, about really all skill sets. And we're talking here about project management being the most important skill set. The second most important one, and we touched on it a bit this evening, is communications. The third being fundraising, by the way. So, communications, Henry, is a really kind of sought after, valued skill set in conservation. I've seen a number of people, including our expert in residence on communications from last month. You can go back and watch that, Lloyd Gofton, have coming from a PR background in a commercial organization. So he used to work as an agency supporting Pizza Hut and Honda, jumped to mind, and he pivoted and now supports marine conservation organizations purely in communications. And there are a lot of communications roles, and organizations are looking often to recruit from outside the conservation industry in. So if you've got really good solid skills and background in PR and comms, they are valuable skills here in conservation. So I really want you to kind of know that message. There is work here for you, and people are looking for people with skill sets like yours. So yeah, do have a look at roles on our sites and others, and reach out for support if you need it as well, because yeah, they're really valuable. Thank you. I just want to say there's a lot of people saying hello. Hello, David from New York as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, just to quickly add to what you just said about comms and PR. Couldn't agree more. Such a core unit within conservation organizations, for sure, especially the bigger ones, but the smaller ones also highly benefit from people who are good at communicating of why it is important what we do and why you should support us in that cause, right? May it be through funds or through a signature on a petition, whatever it is. And then I see one more comment that can receive exactly the same answer: how to bring in GIS, remote sensing / analytical and reporting skills into conservation career. Exactly the same. It's usually with the impact and monitoring unit, but they need GIS experts in order to do good monitoring, good impact assessment. So if you have those skills and if you like applying them and if you want to continue doing that, but in a conservation career, wow, will you find amazing jobs out there, and your skills are highly thought after. And that, just to give another example, same holds true for communications. The cinematography person before as well. We all know and love BBC documentaries with David Attenborough. That's part of communications. That's part of opening and reaching people's hearts for the things that we fight for. So if you're good at that, wow, do organizations benefit from them, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for your questions. Right, I think we're probably about up on time, actually. Yeah, we've got one more question here from Shafia. We'll address that, and then we'll say our thank yous also. And it's been really nice sharing our evening or morning, whatever it is, with all of you. Shafia's just asking hello from CA, which I'm assuming is California. How do you protect the people and places doing the good work? How do you protect the people and the places doing the good work? Many times environmentalists and those doing innovative work are considered to be a threat. Interesting. What strategies can be employed specifically? Like, how can conservationists not be seen as a threat, but how can the good work they'd be doing be more welcomed? Yeah, I guess is paraphrasing. Go, Felix.
Short answer, you can't. You cannot. I live in a country where it's very safe to be fighting for environmental issues, and I'm very lucky and blessed with that. But I know, unfortunately, this is not the case in many other countries on this planet. I think, if I'm not mistaken, need to research that, but I think conservationists are among the top 3 or top 5 groups that are being targeted after journalists and human rights activists. So it's very case and site specific. If you have to protect yourself, your personal life always matters more. So you need to do what needs to be done in order to protect you and the work that you do. Full stop. It's like working in Brazil, working in the Philippines, working in some other areas on this planet can be very dangerous, and we shouldn't talk around that.
Yeah,
It's something that we need to change structurally, but until it's not solved, we need to protect those individuals and make sure they're out of ways harm, because we're fighting the biggest enemies out there, which is big companies. It's about a lot of money, and unfortunately the threshold is very low for these groups and organizations to also go against us.
Yeah, so there's threats to you physically, personally. There's also just being seen as a threat, isn't there? Someone who's not particularly welcomed and not wanted. Yeah, and in those contexts, I think working with local people from the very beginning, all types of people in the project area, and developing the project together in collaboration. So you're not just kind of parachuting in and telling people what to do, but actually really driving it from the ground up as a community-based project, wherever that might be, has a good chance of kind of lessening the threat that you are seen as a conservationist who's just trying to do good work as well. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for your questions, for being here this evening. It's been really nice kind of connecting with you. I really enjoy these live streams. I enjoy seeing all the comments and everything that you get in there as well. So thank you very much as well. And Felix, huge thank you also for kind of coming on, sparing your valuable time. I know you're an exceptionally busy man. It's really nice of you to kind of come in, share your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
With the community. We really appreciate that. And thank you also for designing and delivering such a great course. The feedback's been fantastic. The support you give students is second to none as well. So yeah, we appreciate you, Felix. Wherever you are, everyone in the world, stay safe, stay well. Yeah, we will be here next month. The plan, we've not launched it yet, but I'll sneak it out here. We are going to do a webinar next month around rewilding. So if rewilding and restoration is something that's of interest to you as well, we'll be coming back again. We'll be delivering another webinar where we'll talk through the history of rewilding and how you go about rewilding projects. What does that look like as well? We'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's kind of a little sneaky peek. We'll share more in due course. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bradley. It's very kind. Yeah, we like all your kind of kind words. Yeah, that's it. We'll hit the recording end there, and we'll see you all next month. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. Bye.